Okay, as Derek mentioned, I have an article that I just wrote and posted, I think, Friday. My website is gordonferguson.org, and it's a rather long article. Many of mine are, like my sermons. So don't plan on an early lunch today. Okay. Uh-oh. Try to get my clicker right. All right, the title of the article and the lesson, although the lesson and the article have some differences, I do advise you to read the article. But the title of it is this one: Is your religion focused on Christ or the church? That's very important. And we're going to see why that is very important. Because if we focus on one thing, we can get in trouble. If we focus on the other, we can't get in trouble. So I have a number of things on a slide here about my early years of preaching. Something over 50 years ago, when I started preaching, I heard some older preachers say, rather shockingly, that if God does not punish America for her sins, He's going to owe an apology to Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, that's a pretty shocking statement, right? But I heard that said, and that's when we were sort of early on in the sexual revolution. And about the same time, I heard references to a guy named Unwin. He lived in the latter part of the 1800s, early part of the 1900s, but he was an English ethnologist and social anthropologist in England at the greatest universities. And so he did a study of 88 civilizations, and he talked about what caused them to decline and at what point they would fall. 88 civilizations, and it all had to do with their sexual morality or lack thereof. And so that was a very sobering thing. I wrote an article about that one a year or two back, I think. But I ran across his book and ran across some statistics and articles about that particular book. But it was a very sobering thing. I read an article the other day. I think it came out of Harvard originally, but it was written in 1970, and it marked what the decline of America would look like. And they say so far in the last 50 years, it is exactly on target right now, and it's going to get really worse in the next couple of decades. And so there are a lot of things out there. You can Google that one and find lots of articles to read with a lot of marks of what is happening in our country. When I was training for the ministry, early 70s, 70 and 71, along in there, when I was training, there was a guy that was well known, Francis Schaeffer. What's going on with all this? I'm loud enough. I thought it would work no matter what. But at any rate, there was a well-known spiritual philosopher, Christian philosopher named Francis Schaeffer. I have some of his books. But he was in Dallas at the time, and some of my professors went to hear him speak, and they came back recounting what he had said. And he says, we will be entering soon into the post-Christian era in America. And he gave a lot of evidences for that, and that was 50 years ago, but we are there. If you don't know that, America is in a post-Christian period. And I understand exactly why. Our younger generations look at church in America, and they say, no thanks. And I understand why. Because it is a polluted form of Christianity. If they saw the real thing, it'd be a different response, but that is not what they see. What we have going on in this country right now is a polluted form of Christianity that doesn't have a whole lot in common with what Jesus came to bring. So all of those things are of a concern to me, and I hope they are to you. Recently in my quiet times, I do this one-year Bible thing. I read some Old Testament, some New Testament, some Psalms, some Proverbs every day. I recently went through the book of Ecclesiastes. That's one of my favorite books. Andy Fleming, by the way, just wrote a book on it. And I got a copy. I haven't read it yet, but I'm sure with Andy writing it, it will be good. But in Ecclesiastes, it describes Solomon trying out everything, looking for meaning in life. And he tried everything that we try right now. Nothing has changed in 3,000 years. Right. He tried knowledge. He tried money and possessions and accomplishments. He tried power and position. He tried pleasures of all types. And he could do it. He had all the money in the world and all the control in the world. He could do it, and he did. And he gets to the end of the book after having said over and over, it's a chasing after the wind. It is absolutely meaningless. Yeah. He said, here's what counts. Here's the end of the matter. Bottom line. Fear God and keep His commandments. Right. That's the whole duty of man, he says, because we're going to meet God and give an answer for everything that we have done. Well, that's the bottom line. And I kept reading. You know, he was looking for meaning in life and tried all these things. Now, I'm in Isaiah. And Isaiah is talking about how people are responding, trying to find answers to the challenges they face in life. It's a different focus. But they're looking for answers, but answers as to how to handle their challenges. And he says they're looking everywhere but me. He said they're looking at the stars and the sun and the moon, astrologies. They're looking at all kinds of idolatry. And none of it's going to work. It's all broken. But that's what people are doing. And I think people haven't changed all that much. We're still looking in a lot of wrong places. Is that the next slide? Did it work? I can't quite see it. You know, everything right now in our country and many other countries have been so politicized. Church, governmental politics, office politics, and it's all about power and control. And it has permeated our thinking in almost every area of life. It's all about getting our way because we're right and anybody that doesn't agree with us, they're wrong. And that's sort of permeated everything about us. And so it's infected us. It is an infection. It's a disease. But it's the way it is. We do anything to get our way. We're right. We want it our way. And we'll fight. We'll do whatever we have to do. And it's invaded everything, including the church. Here's what Timothy says about how things look when it really gets bad. He says, mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love. That means without family, natural love. Unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form, a polluted form, but a form of godliness, but denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people. Amen. And so is your religion focused on Christ or focused on the church? There's a reason for the question. But I'd like to ask another one. Did I go two? Yeah, I did two. Got it. A more fundamental question first. Are you focused on kingdom or empire? Now here, I'm borrowing the terminology and the focus here from Michael Burns' book. But he says, kingdom is God's kingdom, His way. Right. Empire is the way of the world. The kingdoms of the world function by empire principles, but the kingdom of God focuses in a very, very different way. And so it all boils down, I think, to where we are looking for the answers. Are we looking for them from the world? Are we looking for them from God? That's the question. Those are the only two questions. Matthew 6:33 says, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." That's two different things. The kingdom and God's righteousness. And the priority matters. God's righteousness had better be first priority. Kingdom's important. We'll see that. But we've got to get our priorities straight on this one, to seek first God's righteousness, not simply the church. Now, how does the church fit into the priority order? And I think this one is such a key to it. I'm not in any way minimizing the importance of the church. Quite the contrary, but I'm saying God's got to be first priority, because that will determine how you view church and how you do church. Really, it will. And so how does the church fit in? Galatians 3:27 says, "All of you who are baptized into Christ have clothed yourselves with Christ." 1 Corinthians 12:13 says, "For by one Spirit we were all baptized into one body," which is the church, "whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and we're all made to drink of the one Spirit." And then in 1 Corinthians 12, he goes on down to talk about the church and how much we love each other and how much we fit together and how much we rejoice together and mourn and hurt together. We're a family. That is what he is saying. And yet, years ago, there was a very popular saying, "Up with Christ, down with the church." And I understand how that got started. Because church was something that was a turnoff to a lot of people, still is. Because it's a different brand of it than you read about in the Bible. And so, yeah, it does turn people off. But the concept of up with Christ and down with the church cannot work biblically. If you look at the Bible, all of those passages, one another, each other, tons of passages about how we function together in the church. We are the family of God. The very act, baptism, that puts us into a saved relationship with Christ automatically puts us in a relationship with each other as brothers and sisters. And therefore, it's all about relationships. That's what family is, right? I did say in the article, I don't think I said it here, but I said, if you're a family, you got some dysfunction in there somewhere, right? And in the article, I said, if you were raised, your family of origin was a perfect family, please come see me. I'll make a list. You'll be the very first one on that list, because I just ain't never seen it. So we got problems. We got to deal with things. But what you come to see in family is it's all about focus. But that's true in the spiritual family as well. It's all about focus. I talk about my 56 years of marriage in the article. And it's really good. I love my wife to death. We've got a great marriage. We just love being together. I've never gotten bored with her. She's way too unpredictable. I love being married, but as much as I love my wife, there are times when I focus on the wrong thing, and it's a very different matter. When we moved to Boston in 1988 and got with Wyndham and Jeannie Shaw for the very first time, I shared this at his memorial a couple of years ago. First time we got with them, Wyndham didn't quite know what to do with me. I was older. I'd spoken on a lot of big programs. He was a little intimidated. And we go in for our first time together. We had just moved to Boston. I don't do transitions well. And so Wyndham, making small talk as he got his little kids, who are now parents and all that, got his little kids off to school. He said, "How you guys doing?" And I said, "Bro, you really want to know?" And he looked kind of shocked. And he said, "Well, yeah." The truth is, I'd like to choke this little woman right now. I would give $1,000 for a picture of his face. It was a strange combination of absolute shock and absolute relief. He was shocked, but he was relieved because he thought, I don't know what to do with this boy. And they did. They worked on our marriage a whole lot, and it helped a ton. But, I mean, that's where we were that day. And we've, people talk about having bumps. We've had some mountains, and we have to get past them, but that's family, guys. That's right. And I've got to realize that's church, too, because it's God's family, and that's the way that we have to look at it. It is a matter of focus. Here's a point. Your perspective about anything is based precisely on your focus. That's right. You focus on something that's negative, your perspective about it will have to be negative. It can't be otherwise. Your focus determines your perspective. And so that's why this verse becomes so important. One of my favorite passages in the Bible. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Now, by the way, who was rejoicing in Philippi? It wasn't the church. They were messed up. They had problems. The only one rejoicing was Paul, and he was a prisoner chained up. Yeah. And he was basically saying, guys, if I can be happy in Jesus right now, don't you think you can do a little better? I mean, that's really about the focus of his message. But he goes on to say, don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. When he talks about prayer, it's always going to have some thanksgiving in there because that helps with the focus when you're hurting. Yeah. He says, the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, bottom line, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, think about such things. Well, Paul, but what about, no, don't think about those. Now, if you got to deal with them, but don't focus on those. They'll corrupt your mind. They'll corrupt your view of God. They'll corrupt your view of everything and everybody. You got to focus on the things that will help you. I read a couple of books recently. I recommend them. I just probably say buy one entitled The Metanoia Method by Kent and Heather McKean. That book really helped me because it's really about changing your mind. Metanoia, that's what it means. That's a word for repent, but it means mind change. And if we get our minds changed and focused correctly, the book talks about how much it affects everything about us, our brain, our body, our health, our everything. But it's all a matter of focus. Now, I think I'm to the next slide. Only Christ as priority corrects our perspective. If He's our focus, everything else then takes its rightful place. Right. Our friends, our family, our church, everything else sort of falls into the right perspective if we're looking at Jesus the right way. Look at these verses. So many verses. I just picked out a couple in Colossians. It's a book about Jesus. So then, just as you receive Christ Jesus as Lord, as your Master, continue to live in Him. Rooted and built up in Him, strengthened in the faith that you were taught, and overflowing with thanksgiving. See how that always crops up? Because if you focus on things that are good that God has done in your life, if you focus on the good, Teresa shared about that a while ago. All these times she's focused on all the bad, and then looking back she realized that God did not treat her as her sins deserved. He kept working and opening doors and getting to her heart and did. Praise Jesus. Overflowing with thanksgiving. See to it that no one takes you captive through the hollow and deceptive philosophy which depends on human tradition and the elemental forces, spiritual forces of this world rather than on Christ. It's so easy to get the world's thinking. We're bombarded with it. I read too much news, I'm sure. But I got all these news things on my phone. Sometimes I go to bed reading this junk, and I wake up feeling so bad, and I'm thinking, how come I'm so weird this morning? Well, part of it, Ferg, is you reading the wrong stuff before you go to sleep. And out of the Metanoia Method book, she suggests writing prayers out at night. I've done it in the mornings for a long time, but at night, it puts the right thing on my mind before I go to sleep. So every night I'm doing that in the bed just before I go to sleep. Colossians 3, since then you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. A lot of focus on Jesus. Getting him as priority in your life, and then that helps you with a perspective of everything else. God's plan for the church is perfect, but it's a plan for imperfect people, because that's all there are. In our imperfection, we will hurt and we will be hurt. We will hurt others. It's just going to be like that. And that's why all through the Bible it says, be like Jesus. The way of the cross is described in such graphic terms in 1 Peter 2 and 3. It's such a powerful passage. And he says very specifically, Christ set an example, follow it. When they treated him horribly, he did not respond in like kind. He responded humbly. When they nailed him to a cross, what did he say? Father, forgive them. They don't understand. They don't get it. They don't know what they're doing. Have mercy on them. Have some way to get their attention. And I'm going to die and do my part to get their attention. And so that's where we've got to go with that one. Now, how do we know that our focus is on Christ first? Now, I'm going to start meddling right here, okay? Hang on. I'm talking to the church very directly in this next part. I don't care what your role is or isn't. Leader, non-leader, doesn't matter. I'm talking to you as an individual disciple of Jesus. And I'm going to say some things that will probably initially offend some of you. And I hope you'll work on that and work it out. I posted the article Friday. I tell people on Facebook, I'm not going to carry on a running debate here. If you don't agree with me, fine. Here's my email address. Write me. I'll dialogue all you want. But Facebook is not the place to carry on a debate. A lot of people do it. I think it is wrong. I think it does far more damage than good. I will not use Facebook that way. And so I tell people, you can say whatever you want to say to me. Just here's the email address. I had one guy took me up on it. Early on, when I started my blog, Black Tax and White Benefits, I had one white boy who wrote me and called me, I think it was 21 bad names in about 50 words. I mean, it was shocking. I dialogued with him. Sometime later, he wrote back and apologized. He said, I was obviously in a really bad place. Yeah, well, I think so. But, I'm happy for that. I got 2 emails since then. Now, I've gotten responses on the Facebook page itself where I announce the article. I always do that. I announce on my Facebook page to my 5,000 friends, here's another article, and I give the link to it. So some comments are on there. Fred made one of them. It was one of the good ones. But anyway, I got 2 emails. I got one from a sister in another church outside Texas, and she's in a situation where I think there are some genuine church problems and problems with leaders where she is. I don't know everything about it, but I know enough to imagine that some of what's really hurting her is probably pretty accurate. But she's still a disciple, and the way of the cross is still the way. And she wrote me a letter and thanked me for the article, and then she laid out all her sins and her things that she's been saying about the leaders, and she went on. It's a really good letter. She thanked me. She was so grateful that I helped her see herself, and she repented. I got another letter from a woman leader who has a lot of contacts all over our movement of churches. Knows a lot of people in a lot of situations. And she said, Gordon, okay, I see that. She lives in another country. But she said, there's a lot of stuff in our movement that's broken. Yep. We got a lot of leadership issues. We got a lot of problems. And I appreciate what you wrote, but from her vantage point, that wasn't the biggest need. But it's the biggest need right here, right now, in my judgment. That's why I wrote it. But I told her, thanks for the input. And I have another article started. And I will hit the other side of the coin. And I will hit it hard. I've been doing that for a long time with things I see in the church, and especially things I see in leadership. I've written 2 books on it. Wyndham and I wrote one. I wrote another one. And people need to go back and read it because we're reverting into some things in some places. Right. And there are things going on. I don't like everything that goes on anywhere. And I'll mention being a critic in a moment. I think I'm on that passage, maybe. What have I got up there?
Thinking politically.
Thinking politically. All right, let me make sure. Okay. The influence of the world has been way too much for us. We've got the social media forms of communication which have invaded us. I'm so grateful for Dr. Yancey's video the other night, and he says, here's how we try to win an argument on Facebook. Not win something worth winning, but win an argument, even if you alienate someone for the rest of their life. But he had some really good stuff on there that typically people do on Facebook. And it's poison. Yeah. It really is poison stuff, and yet that is how many people think today. They think that is the right way to do it. And so it is a matter of slamming and shaming and anything else you can do to win your argument, because after all, you're God's gift to creation and you absolutely have to be right. Thinking politically has invaded us. Politics has gotten into everything. The way we think about everything is political. And it's extremely disturbing. I think about our younger generations, and I've talked to a lot of young people. I know their concerns. I agree with many of their concerns. But they are so involved politically that to them, whatever is going on with their generation, they are so prone to buy into it without knowing even what the Bible says about it and digging it out and making sure we're right biblically. We want to bring it all in. I was in an interview yesterday. There's a brother, Atama Edgy, who has a YouTube channel, and he interviews authors in and outside of our fellowship of churches. He interviewed me recently about my little book, God Are We Good? But he interviewed Guy Hammond yesterday and asked me to be a co-host in that interview. The title of Guy's new book, which came out yesterday or the day before, is entitled Gay and Christian ? Guy does Strength and Weakness Ministries. A lot of you are familiar with him. He's been here before and spoken and all that. A captivating speaker. But guy lived the gay lifestyle before his conversion for a long time. He said yesterday in the interview, and this is out there, so I'm not repeating anything that was supposed to not be repeated, but he said, I've had sex with hundreds of different men. He said, I had a boyfriend for 10 years, a gay boyfriend. He said, I was totally in with the gay community. But then he talked about his conversion, and he said, in all the years since, he says, I've not had any homosexual activity in my life at all because of my convictions biblically. Now, he said, that doesn't mean that my attraction changed. He said, I'm still attracted to men. He said, I prayed about that. I've grieved about that. I've asked God to change that. He said, I'm still attracted to men. Even though he's been married twice. His first wife died. He's been married twice and has a family, has children. Somehow God worked that out. I know a number of people with homosexual attraction that have worked that out. That's right. God can work that out. Is it ideal? Is it the way they would like to see it? Not exactly, but it definitely can be done and done well. And Guy's a great example of that. But in his book, he says, and in the interview, you can watch it. I put it as a link on my website. On my Facebook page. But he says in his article that it's not just young people that are buying into accepting homosexuality as normal. It's not just young people. He said, we've got older people. They don't know what the Bible actually says about it. And so he has other people. He has Doug Jacoby, who is a very great teacher. He has other people in there, but he says, our people don't know what's going on. His subtitle is about that long. It says that gay theology, see, there's a whole theology men have developed now to try to justify this thing. He says gay theology is like a train without a whistle that's about to crash into the church. A long subtitle, but I thought, wow, okay, I get it. But a lot of our young people are so politically inclined, and whatever their age group is saying, whether it be homosexuality or abortion or whatever else, they are finding ways to justify it. Very disturbing. And then, of course, they look at us, and we set all the right examples as older generations, right? We can politicize everything. We can politicize one of the topics I write about, which is the racial issue. We've politicized that thing up one side and down the other in an effort to shut people up or not to talk or whatever else. And then we get down to the worst health crisis we've had in 100 years since the Spanish flu. And we find a way to politicize that. And we've got it right here in this room.
That's right, Gordon. That's right.
Good grief. Do you think you can have a Jesus first focus and get caught up in that? I don't. So if you're off on all of that stuff, I'll just tell you right now, Gordon B. Ferguson Jr. thinks you don't have Jesus first in your life. Now, I don't care what you think about the issues. I really don't. My wife and I, she's not here today. She's got some different views on how she wants to deal with COVID-19. That's what I figure it out, honey. It's your life. We're not going to get all wound up about that one. We can find some other small matters to get wound up on, but not that one. Seriously. And so our younger generation, they got their problems with how much they're influenced by their peer groups and the politics involved in that. And then they look at us as older people, and we're acting crazy. I have so far fought the impulse to buy a T-shirt that I saw on Amazon. It says not. It says ignorance can be educated. Crazy can be medicated. But there is absolutely no cure for stupid. But here's the kicker. Here's the kicker. Everyone in this room could wear it. Because in your mind, the stupid guy is the one that disagrees with you. No matter which side of the river they're on some of this politicized stuff about COVID-19. You got my point?
Yes.
If I've offended you,
It's clear.
good. Sometimes people say, I feel like you just aimed that at me. And I said, did it hit home? Yeah. I said, well, I did. If the shoe fits, wear it. Now, were you the only one? No, I just aimed it at everybody that needed it. And if it hit home, amen. Think about it, pray about it, talk to me about it, get mad at me to start with. We'll calm down later, whatever you need to do. I'm a big boy. Been there, done that. We'll be fine. All right? Guys, if we get a Jesus focus, I don't really think these things are going to be a big deal.
That's right. That's
I don't really think they're going to produce a lot of stomach acid and keep us up at night. I really don't. Look at these scriptures. Here's the second point. How do we know if Christ is our genuine focus? By the way we view and speak about the church. Now, do I think the church got problems? Sure I do. I write about it. I speak about it. I talk to people about it. The right people. That's the next point. But what about the church? How do we deal with our imperfections and our hurts and our misunderstandings and all these things? How do we deal with that? We probably ought to deal with it like the good book says, don't you think?
Yeah.
Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you have a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them together in perfect unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body, you were called to peace and be thankful. Focus, see? Focus on the good. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. The sister that wrote me the email hadn't been obeying these verses. And she wrote, and she told me she hadn't, and she's been doing too much talk in the wrong places to the wrong people, and she knows it's a sin, and she repented. And I thanked her. I said, I'm going to use you as an example. I won't use your name, but I'm going to use you. And she wrote me back, and she said, I hope my example helps a lot of people repent. And so do I. Then my last point before conclusion. By the way that we already got that one. By the way that we view and speak about leaders in the church. And then I have a statement. I'm with Spock. I've said a lot about leaders and to leaders. I wrote a book, Golden Rule Leadership. We got so much flack from certain high-level leaders after that book. My wife said, I'm going to get you a T-shirt, you and Wyndham. I'm going to get y'all a T-shirt with a big target on the back, and you can just wear that. I mean, it got pretty hot there. We had a lot of people who had long conversations with us. We didn't back down at all. And later, a lot of those leaders wish they had read that book and paid attention to it before some other things happened a year later or 2 years later. But I am with Spock on that one. I've dealt a lot with leadership. I've fired, and I put this in the article, I have fired more staff leaders than anyone I know. I got a reputation at one time, pretty widespread one. I was an elder and an evangelist at the same time, and I got a reputation for trying to get rid of all the evangelists and just have elders. I never did any such thing. I was trying to get more of both, but the right kind. And there were some that were not spiritual, and they got to go.
Right.
And I personally fired them. And some other things that went with that. It all wasn't too good, but I'm an old Star Trek guy, the old version, you know. And so I'm like Spock. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. The needs of the flock outweigh the needs of any one shepherd. And I am not going to be a part of defending someone just because they're on staff. I have never done that, and I never will do that. But I know this, I will not let a minority situation cause me to generalize. I will not look at one leader that I think is not spiritual and is not doing right and either needs to repent or get out. I'm not going to look at one like that and let that taint my view of every leader. Amen. That's craziness. No way am I going to do that. And by the way, I haven't been full-time on a church staff for 13 years. I've not been part-time on a staff for 6. So when I'm talking about staff, you can't look at me and say, yeah, Gordon, well, yeah, you would say. You can't do that. Because you don't know anyone that's talked more about bad leadership than I have, most likely. At least constructively, trying to do something good about it. Ministers across all denominational lines are resigning by the hundreds. Why? Because they're getting a lot of stuff they don't know what to do with. Guys, you know, there's a tendency with us when we're hurting. There's a tendency with us. You know, the old story. Bad day at the office, come home and kick the dog or yell at the kids. Well, guess who gets yelled at a lot? Leaders get yelled at a lot, of any type. In your company, in the church, anywhere. Leaders are always the ones that are going to get attacked. Who else are you going to attack? You can't attack the church. No. You got to attack somebody that you think is responsible for the church. And that's actually legitimate that they are responsible, but we've got to watch out how we handle that. Personally, I'm grateful to be a part of the Dallas church. I know many of the staff, not all of them. I've had a lot of talks with a lot of them. I've sent emails out. I have different opinions on some things, and the leaders in Dallas do. That's fine. I don't have the responsibility to make the decisions. They do. And they make some I wouldn't make. But I'm not going to get warped about that. Somebody's got to do it. I've made plenty of decisions as a church leader that not everybody liked, I can tell you for sure. But somebody's got to do it. Right. I do think we have a great bunch of people as leaders in this church. I really do. Now, next week, or this week, I'll have another article out there about some things I don't like at all that some leaders are doing. But I've been in a lot of churches, and I'm just telling you, I'm glad to be in Dallas, because if I was in a few places I know about, there'd be more fireworks than would need to be. But not every leader has all the gifts. None of us do. We wish we did, but we don't. But we're trying to do our best. That's what I think about the leaders that we have. I've appreciated all of the things they've done to give us the virtual services. I appreciate all the young leaders that they had speak. I like some of those young dudes, man. I thought they were great. I've written them emails to try to encourage them, because I appreciate the work that's gone into trying to do that. I appreciate the work that our leaders have done trying to negotiate what he called an unprecedented time. It's easy to look at it from the outside and find a lot wrong, but guys, having been on staff for a long, long time, I just know, boy, sometimes coming up with the answers is excruciatingly painful and difficult. So I'm concerned about that, but then finally I'm concerned about the way we handle concerns within the church, things that you don't like. I'm a critic. I've always been a critic. I don't see any other way to be. Because until we're like Jesus, something can be helped.
Good point.
I need a lot of help. I appreciate the letter I got that basically took me to task. I said, that's good, thanks. I wrote her 2 times. I thanked her because I want to consider what she says. I think she has some things on straight. I think I need to write about some other things. But how do you handle concerns within the church? Here's what bothers me most. Is when we've got problems and we talk amongst ourselves rather than talking to who we ought to talk to. Ask Derek if he's ever sat in a coffee shop with me and heard my critique of him. It ain't been just once either. But he's the guy I talk to. Talk to other staff I know. Look at the emails I've sent out. Some strong ones. But guys, this business of talking with each other and not having the convictions biblically to go and talk to them personally is about as sinful as you are going to get. That part needs to stop. I had a decision to make when I moved from San Diego to Boston many years ago. San Diego was like heaven. Yes. It was amazing. It was in the entrepreneurial stage. Nobody telling us what to do. We could figure it out, pray about it, do all kinds of crazy stuff. It was a wonderful time. Got to Boston and it had gotten pretty systematized. And I saw things that drove me up a tree. And I looked around and I saw there are not many guys my age in this young movement at that time. And I said, well, now I knew guys that came into the movement, but they left. Why did they leave? Because they saw the same things that I saw, and they blew in and blew up and blew out. And I had a decision to make. Am I going to shoot arrows from the outside, or will I become a trusted insider and speak up from the inside in a way that people will listen? Well, you know what I chose. Yeah. And so I've spoken up many, many times. I've written stuff. I've preached stuff. But I'm going to do it right out in the open with the leaders listening when I do it. And I'm going to do it as one of us. I'm in the family. And I'm going to do it the right way. I'm glad I made that decision. I'm glad I had Wyndham Shaw. I spewed garbage all over him when I first went to Boston. I remember one time I drove into his complex, and there was a huge dumpster for that whole complex. It was a big apartment thing or something. And there was this huge dumpster. And I drove in right by it, parked near it, and I thought, I feel just like that, a bunch of garbage. And I went in, and I dumped it all out on Wyndham. And I had about as much inside me as that dumpster had, and it's big. And I got through, and I felt so good. And I drove back by that dumpster, and I thought, good heavens, I have no idea what that dude back there feels like now. But I feel a lot better. But I was talking to a leader who could do something about it. And we just got to do it the right way, guys. Yeah. And so the conclusion is this. Does that say conclusion?
Yes.
2 principles. One is focus determines perspective. And so when your perspective gets negative, you know your focus is negative. Go back and fix it and figure it out. When I start feeling negative about Teresa, I know, Ferguson, you got something screwed up again in your head, boy. And I have to go back and figure out where my focus is off, because when my perspective's negative, I know my focus has also become negative, and I'm looking at the wrong thing too much and not looking at a balance and not looking at the right things. And then your relationship with God will determine your view of other people in the church. Sometimes people think, oh, I'm doing great with God, but they don't like the church. So you don't like God's family? You don't like Jesus' wife, the bride of Christ? You think she's ugly? I don't know about you. I get a little nervous telling Jesus that his wife's ugly. Husbands get kind of upset about that sort of thing. I watched a Monk episode last night where the good detective crawled over a table to tackle a guy that had just said bad things about his wife, who was dead at the time. That was a funny episode. I like Monk. I'm getting more quirky after I watch him, but I like him. If we're not giving grace, we actually are not feeling it from God.
That's right.
When I'm feeling good with God and Jesus is my first focus, I got enough grace to give to all the imperfect people around me, including myself. And I need that. So, whatever fits in here, do it. I know it's a hard time. It is unprecedented. 2020, that was a bad year for me. I mean, I appreciate all the virtual stuff I did and all the Zoom meetings I was in and all these other things, but I'm telling you, it was a hard year. It was a hard year for me and God, honestly. But it's those tough years, if you stay in there, that it gets better. So we got to 2021, I thought it's got to get better. And then came that winter. And I was literally afraid. My wife has COPD. I was afraid if our electricity goes off, what am I going to do? There are people dying in their house because of the cold. What am I going to do? I was worried about my wife, not about me, but I was worried about her. That was a hard time. So finally we get past that. And we get to the summer, and I think, wow, now the summer, I'm going to catch a lot of fish. It's going to be a great summer. And in the summer, I had 2 surgeries, 10 days apart. First one, the pathology came back and said, we don't know if it's cancer or if it's not. We suggest you go in deeper, get a deeper sample. So my surgeon said, we need to do it again. How about 10 days from now? I'm just starting to get over one surgery, and now I got to go back and do that thing again. And that report came back and said no cancer. But then I went for the follow-up, and she showed me the report from the first one. They kept testing the sample, and the first one did have cancer in it. Some type of carcinoma. My daddy died with squamous cell. This wasn't squamous cell. It starts with an A or something. I don't care. I'm not going to look it up because then I'll worry about it. But, that's life, isn't it? I'll tell you one thing. When you're going to be 79 next month, and you've had cancer in your body, this business of getting focused on Jesus first, it comes a lot easier. But I'm just saying to us today, guys, you're younger, I know. I hope you live to be 79. Some of you will not. That's pretty old. Some of you will not. But if you got a Jesus focus, it's not going to matter when it happens.
Right.
I used to worry a lot when I was younger about aging. I hated aging. I hated birthdays and all that stuff. And the thought of death and all those things. As you get older, that all takes its place. I told the surgeon when she told me, about the cancer thing, I said, well, Doc, I said, we all got a shelf life, and I don't know when mine's up, but if this is a part of it, then do the best you can, and God will take it from there. And so I feel great. I'm not sitting around losing sleep about this thing. She thinks the cancer may well come back if it's gone. She said, I'm going to try to get out all the margins. And she evidently did, because that test came back good, the second one. But she said, you got a propensity to develop cancer in that area. By the way, it's the rectal area, just so you know, because you're going to wonder. But that's where it is. So whenever you think you got someone that's being a pain in the butt, I got the real one. But I love the church. I see a lot of things I think need to change. I see a lot of things in leadership that I want to help change. I want to get people to go back and read my book, Dynamic Leadership, again, even some who have read it when it first came out. Changes need to be made. But guys, it's real simple. You get Jesus on straight, and everything else in life will fall into place. The challenges, the people that bug you, the things about the church that bug you, all of that will be in its right place, and you can deal with it the right way. But really, all I'm asking you to do is do what I'm trying to do with all my heart. It's just love God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and my neighbor as myself, and not let Satan change that ever.